And people find this hard to believe. Real meteorologists hate this story, but I'll tell it to you anyway.
Now, I want to jump in because we're going to get to Fritz in a second because he's an LA legend. But Louise, I'm not sure how clear the audience is, and I want to be clear about your work with. I'm going to guess the previous podcasts were the Premiere networks. If I'm wrong, correct me. But let's talk for a second about your background and just bring everyone up to speed about what you've accomplished and those other podcasts you've worked on, so people know the background that you bring to this show.
Yes, my career began as a studio page, and it was one of those things where you get your foot in the door and one thing leads to the other thing. So I became a studio page at a place called Metro Media, Metro Tape. We were doing all of the Norman Lear sitcoms. We had the John Davidson talk show, which was like where, a person like me gets to meet Van Johnson. I mean, it was just crazy. I mean, like, look, I'm from suburban Buffalo, and here I am with Van. I mean, it was crazy. So I've always just been so grateful to work in entertainment. I just consider it to be an honor. But that led to a job at a show called PM Magazine, which led to me meeting Rick Dees, was a local radio personality. I went to write his syndicated countdown show, which is called the Rick Dees Weekly Top 40, which led to me meeting other personalities at KISS FM and forming a company with them called Premiere Radio Networks. And then that was a 15-year rocket ship that led to that company being sold to Clear Channel, which is now iHeartMedia. And at one point I went to one of my partners and I said, "Hey, Craig, what's the chance of me having my own show?" And he said, "None." And he said, "I have two words for you: podcast," because he didn't know that they were just the one word at that time. And I that's how new it was. And I was doing stand-up comedy at the time. So I went to do stand-up comedy that night. And I said to my friend, Laura Swisher, I said, "Have you heard of a podcast?" And she said, "I just heard about it today." I mean, it was just like, it was hot off the press, right? So we were like, let's make one. So, that, of course, led to 100 episodes of Wheezy and the Swish, which was my first podcast. And then I did one with teenagers where I was kind of like giving teenagers advice because like I love to mentor young people. And that one was called Journals Out Loud. And then I did one with some of my comedy friends called Things I Found Online, which was like people our age, discovering the internet. And, oh, look, Lucy was born in Jamestown, whatever you would find online. So then Fritz retired, and now I'm working with Fritz. But yeah, I never was a radio personality at Premiere. I was a creator. I was in charge of all of the creative output. But Premiere had shows that did not involve or include me other than behind the scenes.
Got it. And now Fritz, obviously, my words, you're an LA icon for more than 40 years.
Contractually, you have to say that about me every time you introduce me. I'm an LA icon. Yeah.
And P.S., you just made my next segue super easy because I was going to say, you're a comedian. You own, not only do you own LA TV, but you own LA stages, because for those who don't know, my gosh, seeing you live, it's a phenomenally fun, entertaining evening.
Well,
so what was it a very conscious segue to get into podcasting? Was it a new thing for you? Was it something you were eager to do and Louise brought you in, or what was that segue like?
No, my involvement with her podcast is totally her both blame and her gift that she gave to me after I retired. People find this hard to believe. Real meteorologists hate this story, but I'll tell it to you anyway. I was working at the Comedy Store in 1982 And because I talked on stage about having done the weather earlier in my broadcasting career, the news director from Channel 4 and his wife were in the audience that night. And he came up to me after the show and he said, I really enjoyed your show, particularly the thing about doing the weather in the Navy, but not knowing anything about it. He said, would you have any desire to come to Channel 4 and do some vacation relief weather forecasting? And I was making $25 a night at the Comedy Store. And so I almost passed out. I said, of course, when do you want me to start? He said, well, you have to audition. So I auditioned and got the job. And I did 2 years as a vacation relief guy on the weekends, filling in on the weekends and filling in for people on vacation. And then 2 years later, I was bumped up to the weekday weathercast position. And I retired 2 weeks shy of my 40th anniversary. And it's just unbelievable. And I didn't set out to have a career in weather. This opportunity presented itself. I could continue to do stand-up. I came out here from Buffalo, New York, where Reezy's from, to do stand-up. And so even as the weather job, I was able to continue to do stand-up. And so I had two careers. One paid for my children's education. The other exercised my ego. And it both worked out.
Where do we find you? How often are you broadcasting? Where do we find you? Websites, social media? What's the best way to follow and find this show?
Anywhere you type Media Path Podcast, it's gonna come up. So depending on what apps that you have, or just the internet in the browsing window, Media Path Podcast, you'll find our website. The only thing that makes podcasting unique is it's wherever you are. Our podcast is on YouTube, so you at least know how to do YouTube. So just go to YouTube and search Media Path Podcast.